So yeah, firstly, yeah, big thanks Emma and Debbie for having me, and thanks Rosie if you rewatch as well. Yeah, it's really good to have a chance to be here, and yeah, really good to meet the group. It's my first time but yeah, first time with this group. Um, well, I'll kind of do a bit more of an intro in a moment, but I've been in the non-profit sector for quite a long time, so I'm just yeah, it's just always really good to have a chance to connect with others who yeah, kind of focused on working with important organizations doing good things. So yeah, good to meet you all. Um, Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay, and the title slide. So yeah, sort of what I wanted to run through today is some of the main things that are kind of good to bear in mind following some of the recent changes and developments, sort of within Salesforce and kind of outside of Salesforce as well, in terms of sort of security practices and changes to what's possible and enforced through Salesforce in relation to integration security. Um, so yeah, firstly, little bit about me. So I work for an organisation called Give Clarity that some of you might be familiar with. We're a UK Salesforce partner that specialise in non-profits, and our kind of special area of expertise within non-profits is fundraising. We do various sorts of non-profit implementations, but fundraising is probably the biggest chunk of that. I've been with Give Clarity about sort of 3 or 4 years, and doing a mixture of looking after development for our App Exchange apps and also technical architecture for sort of medium and large non-profit clients. Um, I also sort of have a slightly separate life. So I also publish an app on the App Exchange. A co-founder along with sort of one other. We have a small company and we publish an app called Formula Share for dealing with particularly tricky sharing requirements. So yeah, sort of lots of security across both sides of the split there. Yeah, as I mentioned, I've been working with non-profits for quite a long time. I've been, yes, as I say, with Give Clarity about 4 years, but prior to that, about sort of 8 or 9 years working directly for non-profits doing Salesforce stuff. So sort of a mixture of business analysis, architecture, development at times. So sort of seen most parts of the core platform in one way or another. Um, okay, so yeah, as Emma mentioned, there's so, there's so much that I would love to be talking about right now, and even what we'll go through here is quite a sort of heavily curated subset. And all, yeah, even that's quite a long list, but there's just so much going on with security and Salesforce at the minute, and I want to kind of do justice to the areas that are sort of important to know about at the moment. So yeah, main things I'm going to be talking about are integration security, and that covers yeah both vendor managed integrations. This is where you effectively have a third party kind of product that's bought or perhaps a free app that is connecting with your Salesforce org, and the configuration and things to be aware of when you're setting that up or making sure that what you've got set up in that way is secure in your org. Also custom integrations, so where there's been an integration that's been built specifically for your org. There's sort of a few additional things to think about and to plan for and to know about in terms of making sure that those are set up securely. I wanted to talk specifically about integrations that connect through what's called the SOAP login method, which is a sort of a legacy, well, kind of an older authentication method, and things are changing around that. So I just wanted to touch on that. To talk a little bit about browser extensions as well. So things like Salesforce Inspector Reloaded, where you have sort of an extension that's installed into Chrome or another browser that's able to interact directly with your Salesforce org. Just talk a little bit about how that works and some of the security considerations to bear in mind about extensions connecting that way. Um, and then we've got a little bit of a time sort of towards the end. I wanted to talk about some of the recent communications that have come from Salesforce around sort of in the security area, and just kind of unpack those a little bit, talk about who they might affect and what it might actually mean. So, um, I mean, um, I don't know if this applies to everybody, but every time I see one of those emails, it normally takes me about 5 minutes to even really kind of get my head around what they're trying to say, and then usually about about another half hour or so of digging around and really trying to kind of figure out what to do about it, basically. And I've got quite a long Salesforce background, and I'm just conscious it's just like we get so many of those things kind of every. It feels like every week there's something new to sort of to research and think through, and yeah, just want to try to sort of simplify some of the recent ones, and yeah, kind of help sort of unpick yeah what really is important to think through about around those. Um, Okay, and then and then as Emma said, want to have lots of time for Q&A. So there is will hopefully be a good chunk of time at the end of the session that we can kind of dedicate to questions. But I wanted to sort of pause probably at each of these kind of topics just to just to check kind of as we're going if there's anything that anyone wants to dig into more. So yeah, if you do sort of think of something as I'm going, yeah, I'll have some pauses to answer those. I probably won't be looking at the chat, but Emma, if you see anything come through at the chat, if you're happy just to bring that up as well, that'd be great. Thanks. Um, Cool. Okay. So just before we sort of dig into the details, I guess just a bit of kind of context around sort of why integration security is so much of a focus for Salesforce at the minute, and also just why we should all really be taking this stuff quite seriously. Um, so yeah, it's probably not a surprise to many of you, but there's the world at large has been changing in terms of sort of threat kind of potential, and Salesforce is increasingly becoming kind of quite a commonly targeted system for threat actors. So groups like Shiny Hunters, who've been that's probably sort of the best known of groups that have had recent successful attacks that have led to data breaches from some quite high profile customers. Um, there's also just I guess in terms of sort of like capabilities of these actors, the availability and sophistication of what's possible with AI now means you can have really quite directed sort of personalized attacks that have a much greater chance of success than previously. So um, it is it is in some ways a more risky environment than it used to be. So yeah, so we do just need to be as vigilant as we can be really on an ongoing basis. Sort of layered on top of that, kind of got this sort of growing problem with Salesforce that orgs just get older and older, and I'm sort of fairly used to working with quite new implementations from earlier in my career, and now some of the orgs that I see, it's you see orgs that are sort of 10, 15, or even more years old, and huge mix of Apex and flows and custom integrations and all sorts of things that are have a mixture of patterns and a mixture of security practices, and it's just it's hard to keep on top of this stuff, and the more complexity and the more variation there is, the more risk there can be. So yeah, sort of particularly if you are working with an older org, this stuff is is sort of even more important to keep on top of. Um, okay, so yeah, I guess, and just as sort of a specific example of one of this is just kind of one of the incidents that's happened fairly recently. Some of you might have heard of the Grubhub breach a few weeks ago. So this is one of the breaches that's linked to the Shiny Hunters group. And one of the things that's quite interesting about this breach, particularly, I think, is that it really sort of highlights how important the kind of the ongoing kind of maintenance and assessment and reacting basically to security incidents is. So sort of roughly what happened in as part of the Grubhub breach is that so Grubhub were one of the organizations that were affected from an earlier attack on a separate or on a specific integration called for an app called Drift. So the Shiny Hunters group basically were able to steal tokens that were associated with the Drift integration that effectively meant that they could authenticate to orgs that had installed the Drift app and sort of act as the users that are that were associated with those integrations. So that was that was quite a big kind of public thing at the time. It was very kind of clear that what system was affected there. It was and what customers were affected. It was basically everybody that had installed the Drift app. There was a lot of guidance put out as to what to do about it. You basically needed to revoke access to the Drift app. The Grubhub breach appears to have happened quite a lot later, a few months later, and I think the sort of the general understanding is that the tokens that were associated with that Drift app were actually used sort of some time after it was publicly known that those had been compromised. Um, so yeah, it was if effectively it seems like it was an avoidable incident. In the sense that if the steps have been taken to lock down the access to the app, and we'll sort of see in a moment how to do that sort of thing, that breach could have been prevented. So yeah, kind of just a reminder. It is yeah, this stuff. It's not always about kind of get everything set up securely. You do need to yeah, sort of really kind of keep abreast of what's happening and be ready to respond as well. Um, Okay, so I just wanted to start just by sort of summarizing sort of roughly kind of the main components that are involved in most modern integrations. So by modern integrations, I basically mean the ones that are associated with connected apps and external client apps that we'll be talking about in some depth. So an analogy that's kind of often used is around sort of this kind of a hotel sort of concept. So if we think of our Salesforce org as being a bit like a hotel that we allow guests into, and we allow them to access to certain areas depending on who they are and what they're allowed to do based on what they booked at the hotel. Um, so sort of digging into that a little bit, we've got so as guests sort of come into the hotel, they'll need to demonstrate who they are. So there's a process of in sort of in an integration context, what that's known as is authentication. So that means basically me as I suppose as an integrating system in the integration um, context, proving who I am. Um, so yeah, this sort of typically is done as by an integration user, sort of demonstrating who they are, or a human user sort of putting in a password or logging in through single sign-on or something. It's kind of analogous in some sense to sort of proving who you are as you go into a hotel. The authorization, as we call it, sort of the integration kind of context, is equivalent in some sense to the hotel's registration list. So this is really about it's not just about who you are. It's what are you allowed to do based on who you are effectively. Um, so in the context of Salesforce, what this means is the configuration that's set up around the or within the connected app or the external client app that effectively determines, okay, based on who we have trying to access this way, what are they permitted to do within the Salesforce org. And then the sort of the final step that yeah, kind of typically the one you think about because it's when things actually happen with the integration is the access. It's then the external system sort of using the access that's been provided through the authentication and authorization mechanism to actually do something in the org. So that might be extracting some data, it might be pushing some data into Salesforce or changing metadata, something like that. So yeah, sort of accessing Salesforce through the API. Yeah, so that's sort of equivalent in some sense to sort of using your key card that you've been issued when you showed your passport and were verified to be a guest at the hotel. You're provided that access. So the bits that I'm going to be talking about for most of the time here relate to the authorization part of this process. So yeah, just to kind of set expectations. Yeah, as I said, I'd love to just talk in depth about a lot of other areas as well, but most of the changes in terms of what Salesforce is changing and things that we can do to make sure our orgs are as secure as possible relate to this to these authorization steps. Okay, so yeah, I mentioned connected apps and external client apps a minute ago. I just wanted to talk in a little bit more depth about what those things are and kind of broadly what they're for. Mm. So, um, so the first thing to mention is they're almost the same. They kind of look different in the UI. There are a few sort of subtle differences in terms of the feature sets and how they behave. But they are fundamentally there for the same thing, and 95% of the functionality is the same. So I think it's quite easy to be sort of a little bit intimidated by this external client apps, which are the newer of the two, sort of came along fairly recently, and it's there's a lot of technical language about what they are and why they're different, why they're better than connected apps. But I think if you are sort of feeling a bit overwhelmed with this, it is just worth remembering these are based, they're fundamentally doing the same job. Um, and that job is as I say, to kind of to control that authorization process. So to contain the settings and and the policies that determine who can access the org, and yeah, things like how long that access is permitted for, um, and yeah, is that user allowed to kind of allowed to authenticate without sort of logging in again, like within a certain period of time, those sorts of things. Um, with both connected apps and external client apps, there's a separation structurally between the what Salesforce termed the settings of the app and the policies of the app. Um, the settings are they're kind of essentially sort of what this app is and what authentication methods are allowed through it. One of the most important things about the app, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but like the name of the app is in the settings. And like I mean, that is, it's easy to forget about it, but it's really important because that's what your users are going to see when they're authorizing an app. So yeah, that name kind of being kind of tied to an integration that somebody knows what it is quite important, and so that's controlled in the settings. And yes, as I say, sort of the authentication methods and yeah, few other bits and pieces are controlled in those settings. Um, then the policies are around they're more around kind of who is provide yeah who can can be provided access through that app, and say those settings around when how often that those users need to re-authenticate. We'll go into a bit more depth in both those areas in a moment. So that sort of structural separation is quite important because at times those two bits actually live in different orgs. So that's quite an important kind of paradigm um, to understand in relation to how both of these work. Okay, so the first sort of specific kind of integrations I wanted to look at are vendor managed integrations that are managed through connected apps. Actually, maybe just before I do, maybe I'll just pause for a moment there, just to check if there's any questions just on what I've covered so far.
So in the chat, I think it's a question that we should just come back to maybe later on, but just about overall, but just in terms of this, Michelle's just said, was this what was just changed in spring 26 that you cannot add new connected apps any longer? Will we have to
Um,
move external client apps by X date for existing connections?
that's right. Yes, that does relate to this. Yeah, and we'll come back to that.
Brilliant.
So yeah, but yeah, good question. Um, cool. Okay, so yeah, so the first sort of couple of flavors we're going to look at are for vendor managed integrations, and the first one of those is how that's done with the connected apps kind of version of authorization. Um, so as I mentioned earlier, vendor managed integrations are basically where there's a product that sort of sits outside of your Salesforce org, and outside of the infrastructure that your organization owns, that you are kind of allowing to connect to your Salesforce org. So historically, the way that this was done, the way in the last few years that this has been done is through connected apps. So and the kind of few sort of handful of examples down at the bottom there, but sort of broadly speaking, like probably most of the third parties that you're aware of that connect to Salesforce would be connecting in something like this way. So there are three sort of main kind of components involved here. There's the on the left here uh, the the vendor tool itself. So this isn't part of Salesforce. This is their sort of either like an off-platform kind of like a web application or something. So something like Workbench, for example, which is a sort of runs in your browser. It's a web application. And connects to Salesforce, or something like Data Loader, which is a local application, sort of sits on your desktop and connects to Salesforce. But fundamentally, this is an element that sits outside of Salesforce. Um, and then the connected app that's involved for the authentication is kind of split across the vendor's Salesforce org and your own Salesforce org. Now this, like when I first came to Salesforce, this took me ages to get my head around like how this was really working, because it just seems super weird that you can have this kind of concept of this connected app that doesn't really live in your org, but when you connect to it, then it sort of magically appears in your org, and it's quite different to anything else that you see in Salesforce. So um, uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's just good to kind of get a sense of how these things relate and where those elements sit. Um, so so yeah, as I say, the settings part is that's sort of the definition of the app and the methods of authentication that are allowed. So those are all controlled and live in the vendor's org. The policies which control which users can access it can access through the app, and sort of what the token policies are. Those are controlled in your org. um, so yeah, oops. So yeah, well, as we're going, I want to kind of take time just to reflect on some of the things that have changed either recently or that are due to change in the near future in relation to things that I'm talking about, and yeah, just make sure everyone's sort of comfortable about what this means and what you might need to plan for around it. So this is probably one of the kind of higher profile things in that space, just because it kind of affected nearly everyone. So this was a change that Salesforce brought in shortly after the first Shiny Hunters breach, which really kind of highlighted some of the vulnerabilities around the connected apps approach, and specifically it was um, this was put in place to control against the risk that any of your end users can basically authorize any connected app that you haven't blocked, and kind of start using that and provide that app access to your org. Um, so so yeah, there's now mechanisms in place to protect against that. So connected apps need to be installed by somebody who has appropriate permission. Um, and that sort of process of installing, it's that effectively, if you go back to that diagram, what that sort of installing process does is it sort of initializes this set of connected app settings in your Salesforce org, and it gives you that place that you can control what those settings are. So it's the obviously the sort of the question of do you install or don't you install is an important part of what to go through when you're setting up a new connected app, but it's equally important to actually go and revisit those policies and check those policies and adapt those where that's appropriate as well. Um, the other thing I just wanted to kind of really emphasize is, and this is a good time to do it now, and it's a good time to continue to sort of plan to do it on an ongoing basis, is um, if you've got connected apps in your org that are not actively being used, it it's depending on how they're configured, it's very possible that those apps have issue tokens that could still be used to allow those external applications to connect to your Salesforce org as if they are you or your end users. So it's really important to kind of to have like a general sort of good hygiene around blocking or at least uninstalling connected apps that you no longer use. Uh, yeah, to make sure if there is a threat that affects one of those apps that yeah they're not able to connect. Um, okay, I think just before we go on to the next part, I think what I wanted to do is just kind of run through some of the um, just run through the process very briefly around actually installing a connected app, and sort of showing the policies as well, just to um, just to kind of show the whole sort of end-to-end process of installing and setting up policies, and then also how you kind of go about uninstalling or blocking apps as well. So I've got an org here that I'd like to install a connected app for. This is dataloader.io that uses a connected app to help it connect. So I'm going to I want to log in. Oops, that wasn't what I was hoping would happen. Um, well, I think I still have this connection set up. Maybe I just need to log out here. There we go. It wouldn't be a proper demo without it going wrong at the first moment. Let's see if this works. Okay, so I've gone to kind of log in through dataloader.io, and then effectively what that's doing is you can kind of um, uh, yeah, it's redirecting me to say log into the Salesforce org. So this is the authentication part of establishing an integration. So I'm going to hit login there to authenticate, just to prove my MFA. It's then prompting me to authorize this app. So this is the chance that I have to review what the app is actually asking for in terms of access. So each one of these lines here is effectively an ability that I'm providing to the app by saying yes, you're allowed to have access to this org. So in this case, this is actually this is quite an extensive set of things that data loader expects. In many cases, we sort of hope that would be quite a sort of shorter, more targeted list. As I approve that, what that should have done is set up a connected app um, in my org, so I can see dataloader.io. At this point, it's uninstalled. I had the permissions, as I say, already to install that, to use an uninstalled app. I could also then go and install it. So this is generally sort of the first thing that you should do as soon as a new app is used. So the point that's installed, that then kind of gives us the power within our org to control the policies. So until that point, there's I can data loader has access, but it's through the default set of policies. So the installing gives me the opportunity to control those. And probably the most important kind of ones to pay attention to here are the permitted users. So by default, connected apps are set up with all users may self-authorize, which is that's potentially quite a risky thing, because you could have any of your users can then go in and use this app and approve themselves as having access. So in almost all cases, it's a good idea to set that to admin approved. Users are pre-authorized. What that means is that it's then only people who are part of a permission set or a profile that I associate with the app that can use it. The other one to really pay attention to is the refresh token policy. And again, the default is not our friend here. So connected apps are set up with a default of refresh tokens valid until revoked, which basically means, so if I leave it like that, the refresh token is it's a mechanism that an app can use to authenticate even kind of a long period of time after I've sort of authenticated as me. So after I've put in my password to say yes, it's okay for the app to connect. So it can be useful for that to be like a non-zero value. Otherwise, I'll have to log in every single day. But having it valid forever is quite a big risk. These tokens can sit out there on servers somewhere. It's very easy to lose track of what tokens have been issued and where they've been issued to. So in general, it's a good practice to have those expire after a sort of after a kind of a fairly short amount of time. So our sort of working policy to give clarity is to have these expire. Recommend that these expire after 90 days when they are needed. So if I save that, so that's saved my policy changes. The other thing, I need to do, because I've said this is only admin approved users, so I need to associate a permission set or a profile to say it's only people with that access that can use the app. So I've associated with that permission set. So at this point, it's the only people that can use data loader are people who have this permission set. And it'll also, so the refresh token policy means that a refresh token will be sent back to data loader. So these people don't need to kind of to log into Salesforce every time that they log into dataloader.io, but they will have to re-authenticate every 90 days. So yeah, they'll have to sign in again every 90 days. Um, okay, I touched on sort of what to do if you find that you've got connected apps that you don't need anymore. So if we sort of come to the realization, actually, we don't need dataloader.io anymore. Sort of the thing to do is to should really be kind of doing this proactively as we realize these things. If you go to, you can uninstall directly from the connected app view there as well. Uh, uh, from the view there, you can also do that from the OAuth usage view. Find these screens have a habit of jumping me back to classic, so I kind of got used to sort of working between the two here. So we can see now that I've installed that's taken it out of the list. So it's as if dataloader.io has not been used in the org. So that'll basically stop anybody who was previously using DataLoader from continuing to use it. It'll also expire the tokens that were associated with that. We can it's also an option to kind of go one stage further if there's an app that you want to kind of actively, you know, sort of send the message that it should really never be used. There's an opportunity to actually block that there. So yeah, if there's a connected app that's installed and it's known to be a security risk, it's probably a better idea to block that, which is going to stop anybody from being able to reauthorize that in future, even if they've got the permission to reauthorize apps.
We've got a couple of questions, Lawrence. Might be
Uh,
worth and some of them have been answered. So if anybody's asked a question that I think's been answered, I'm going to kind of move on. Simon asked for OAuth policies. Would you expect that most should be admin authorizers than self-authorization as best practice?
yeah. So I think it's a simple answer.
Yeah,
um,
no,
I
I
think,
thought that's what
yeah,
you'd say.
I think the only exception really is if like there's a genuine use case for all of the users in your org to be using a particular tool. So it depends a bit on sort of what the what the org's for really. But yeah, I think it's very unusual that you would that self-authorizing is appropriate.
Yeah, I was thinking about things like TBID, which is your Trailblazer ID. That might be something that's open to
Yeah,
everybody.
no, that's a good shout. Yeah.
Somebody's asked, would changing the refresh token revoke the existing OAuth connections?
Changing the refresh token revokes the existing OAuth connections. That is a good question. I'm actually not sure. So it would, I don't know. I can take that away and have a dig around about that. So and I guess where the question is going is, does it revoke the access tokens that are associated with that user as well as the refresh token? So it will see revoke the refresh token. Um, the refresh token is sort of this, yeah, it sounds like that person's quite familiar with sort of how tokens work, but for everyone else, there is so refresh token is sort of generally quite a kind of long lifetime token that allows you um, to get access, yeah, sort of in the future with or sort of the long time after access has been initially provided. There's also shorter term, what are called access tokens, which are provided immediately on authentication and when refresh tokens are used, and those are sort of used typically multiple times within a, typically a few minutes or a few hours. Um, I'm not sure whether access tokens are revoked that way, but I'll look into it. Um,
Amazing. Another question is, Paul says when he goes to the manage connected apps list, some of the apps have an icon which indicates that it's installed. However, I click on the names of those that don't have that it still says they're installed. So what does the icon mean?
um, Good question. Let's see if we can find something equivalent. This might be better to walk to. Um, I know there is, so there's a distinction between connected apps and uh, connected apps brackets installed. Um, oh, sorry, brackets managed, I think is what I was thinking. So if we order these by type, so I talk a little bit about what those are, and then just let me know if you think this doesn't
Is
yeah,
this the
doesn't
list that
cover it.
you were looking
So
at, Paul?
No, mine says manage connected apps.
Oh yeah,
managed
I think
connected
Paul's looking
apps.
at the managed connected apps list in setup.
Uh,
It's that one. There is something a little bit strange about this list. Now, I've noticed that if you change, say, an app to only admin approved users are pre-authorized, it doesn't always update that in the permitted users thing
oh,
on the
really?
page.
That's
Yeah.
that's
Now, I
interesting.
think they may have corrected it in this release. But I know
Hmm.
when we were doing them last year, you'd sort of look at one and you'd be like, I've been and already done that. Then you'd open it, you'd be like, oh, it's not. It says in here it's only admin users, but not in the list. Are you talking about the little envelope, Paul?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So this I believe means that it's a packaged connected app, and mo like most of these actually just come with Salesforce. So when you create a brand new Salesforce org, things like yeah, sort of the chatter apps and I think data loader as well are just sort of there out of the box. And I think it's because on the Salesforce side, um, yeah, I think that they exist as packaged apps within some Salesforce or owned orgs somewhere, and they're installed into customer orgs. Um, whereas, yeah, sort of things like this are these are connected apps uh, that are either I've created directly in this org or that are unpackaged connected apps that live outside of the org but are used in this org. Um, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Debbie had a question about the refresh time, the token time, I assume, for things like an integration user, so something like form assembly. Um, my understanding from what you said, Lawrence, was provided it was used within 90 days, it will continue to authenticate, right? It won't expire,
Well, there's different
or will it?
options. That is an option. Just leave it open. Uh, the um, uh, uh, I mean, so things like form assembly might be a reasonable candidate to say that could be an exception to expiring within 90 days. If you've got, obviously if you're relying on um, that integration kind of working without user involvement, then probably the last thing you want is for it to just stop because nobody's logged into it for 90 days. Um, the let's jump to Lightning. Um, uh,
If that app's been used within 90 days, to say they've had a form submission, it would extend past that, right? Is it from the last usage, that 90 days?
um, it depends on the option that's selected. So it can. So I'm struggling to find the view that I'm looking for. Um, you've got the option either of saying it just lasts for 90 days regardless of how often it's used, or you can say basically the clock resets every time it's used, so it will um, it'll be it'll be revoked if it's not used for 90 days. So you've got either option. So if you can so yeah the configuration to yeah if you're expecting form assembly to be used sort of every day or very frequently, then using that option should sort of protect you against that sort of falling over unexpectedly. But yeah, as I say, yeah, that might be a reason that um, that you just kind of have that configured to not expire.
There's quite a lot of questions in the chat, and I don't, to be honest, think we're going to get to them all, everybody, just because with Lawrence will eventually have to go. But one of the things that I will ask, I think this is a good question, is for any new integrations, is it best practice to create an external client app? If so, is there a document to provide to suppliers if they've not worked with connected apps before?
Yeah, good question. We will come on to, well,
Great.
yeah, we'll come on to it, but it's also a one-word answer that I think yes is the answer. It is best to be creating external client apps now, and particularly in the context that it's a real pain to create connected apps. Salesforce, they're very intentionally putting friction into to try to stop people from creating new connected apps, basically. So yeah, external client apps is the way to go. Is there a document for it? I'm not aware of one, to be honest. But again, I can take that away. I'd be interested to know myself. I mean, um, yeah, I can, yeah. Let me take that one away. Yeah, I don't know if Salesforce have published anything or if there's anything sort of really good out there in the community. But yeah, it's a good question.
Okay, let's pause questions for now and let Lawrence continue, and we'll see where we get to.
Um, cool. Okay, thanks, Emma. So, um, okay, so yeah, a few sort of a couple of other things I just wanted to talk about in relation to connected apps. One of the things, yeah, so I touched on this very briefly that there is this new permission approve uninstalled connected apps, which is basically what you need to be able to use a connected app that's never been connected to the org before. So yeah, for obvious reasons, we need to be really careful with this permission because it's kind of the crux of the Salesforce change is to try to avoid this from being possible for most users. Now there's kind of two models of how to use this, and I'm what I think is the better of the two is what I've outlined on this slide. Is that if you have a new connected app to be set up for the org, that you kind of work with the users that require that the app will be connecting through, and temporarily assign those users this approve uninstall connected apps, which allows them the initial authorization to be done as that user. So in the context of something like, was it form assembly, the example somebody mentioned a minute ago? Yeah, so for form assembly, for example, that might be a form assembly integration user. So sort of temporarily assign the permission to the integration user, have that integration user authorize the form assembly app, and then as an admin, you'd go and then install the app and configure the policies, and then obviously revoke the permission from that end or that integration user or end user. So the main kind of benefit that you get from doing it that way is the only user that has provided access to that external system is the user that has the permissions that external system needs. So for something like form assembly, it probably doesn't need access to your entire data model. It probably doesn't need to be able to sort of log in through web scopes and sort of do things that are sort of outside of its normal remit. So if you kind of look at this a different way, and if you as an admin were to authorize that first and then set it up as allowed for the integration user, it means that sort of off the bat, form assembly has already got access to your access as an admin, so can do everything that you can do as an admin. So yeah, this is, I think this is a better alternative than sort of installing those apps as an admin every single time. Obviously, some of the apps are for admins, so yeah, in that context, it's fine to just install those directly that way. Okay, I think we kind of covered this during the demo. Yeah, just yeah, I think we've gone through this in quite a bit of depth. So yeah, permitted users, general, admin approved, pre-authorized, and setting up refresh tokens to expire within 90 days, unless that's unless that persistent integration is needed. Okay, Okay, and this has sort of come up a couple of times already as well. So yeah, so I think we're all aware Salesforce are sort of quite actively pushing us all towards external client apps, and it you now basically require a support ticket to set up a connected app. So as we'll sort of touch on in a minute, external client apps are better in some sense, and yeah, they're a sort of they're more of a kind of like intentional way of setting up an integration. So whereas connected apps, you sort of, you're kind of setting it up by logging in through the app, which is in some senses a bit of a strange way to do it. With external client apps, it's very much more you're configuring the access, and then the system can't access your org until that policy and that access is already set up. So yeah, they are better, but they're just a little bit different, and yeah, do take yeah, it is worth kind of getting your head around what those differences are. Okay, so yeah, the next sort of flavor of the vendor managed integrations is sort of how this should be done with external client apps. So yeah, sort of very similar. As I mentioned, these are very, very similar to connected apps conceptually. The kind of the main difference in terms of how things look in a vendor managed integration is that the vendor external client app would actually be typically it would be part of if it's a managed if it's an app exchange app which has a managed package, generally that vendor would include the external client app within their managed package, and that means if yeah, once you install that package into your org, or if you upgrade to a version with the external client app, you'll get the equivalent of an installed connected app sort of set up in your org that way. And there's the other kind of key different, or one of the other key differences is that there is as I mentioned, there's no sort of equivalent of this thing of like, oh, you set the app up by authorizing it to your org. The app is either in your org or it's not. If it's not, you can't connect. Sort of through that app. If it is installed through a package in this context, then the policies that are set up for that external client app apply. So yeah, that app kind of needs to be there before the external tool can be connected. So yeah, in terms of sort of what to look out for around policies, yeah, same sort of stuff here. Yeah, same sort of practices around make sure it's the policies scope this to just the relevant users using a permission set typically. Yeah, kind of think carefully about the refresh token policy and do set that to expire when you can. And yeah, just to mention, this is still quite a new thing, particularly for app exchange vendors who've been very kind of used to the connected app model, where they have their unpackaged connected app and then all of the customers sort of connect through that. This is it's quite a kind of change in ways of working for them. There's been so all partners that have integrations have been notified in December, I think it was, that that going forwards, external client apps are required for any new integrations added to manage packages to pass a security review. So I think it's going to happen slowly, but it is going to happen that more and more external client apps are going to be distributed in this way rather than vendors having connections set up through connected apps. So yeah, expect to see a bit more of this. And just I think just to sort of briefly look, we've spent a bit of time on connected apps. I just wanted to quickly kind of show what an external client app is or sort of looks like. So yeah, as I mentioned, one of the, I think, sort of slightly unfortunate things about external client apps is they're just like they're in a different part of the setup menu. They like the screens look quite different. They're uh, yeah, they just look like they're a completely new thing to get your head around. But actually, when you dig into it and you look at the settings, they are sort of pretty much the same as what you see in a connected app. So yeah, in the policies, you have the same sort of control around self-authorized or pre-authorized. You have the same refresh token policies, same IP policy, and yeah, sort of broadly they work in the same sort of way. Um, this example is an external client app that has been packaged in this org, and it's been installed into this org. So just to sort of show a little bit about what's different. So if I go to the settings of this connected app, so in the this would be the equivalent of the vendors org, the partners org. So they've obviously got control over the name of the app and the OAuth settings, which is sort of the allowed connection mechanisms and so on. In the customers org that it's installed into, I don't have any control over the settings. Those are just sort of inherited from the vendor's setup. But I do have access to control policies. So yeah, I associate permission sets and profiles just like with a connected app. Yeah, and have those controls that I ran through there as well. So yeah, it kind of looks a bit different, but it's the same stuff really. And yeah, I've got a slide just around some of the other differences at the moment, but yeah, that was sort of brought roughly what they look like. Okay, I think before I go on to custom integrations, is there anything else just around sort of vendor managed want to touch on?
I think in the interest of time, I'm going to suggest that we continue, Lawrence. There are some questions, but I think let's continue and then we can maybe come back to
Yeah,
questions at the end.
cool. Yeah, sounds good. Oops. Okay. So custom integrations. So it's sort of a little bit simpler what I wanted to talk about here in some sense, mostly because connected apps and external client apps in this context are sort of used in much the same way. So in both contexts, well, firstly, just to sort of talk about what we mean by custom integration. So this is where you have a sort of a system that sort of lives as part of your architecture that connects to your Salesforce org, and the connected app or external client app that help facilitate that. So yeah, that could be something like Talend or another ETL tool that's pushing data into your org, or a website integration, connection to data warehouse, something like that. And in this model, generally the whole sort of connected app or external client app is set up locally in your org. So yeah, as I say, it's sort of broadly the same kind of architecturally, if you're using connected apps or external client apps. In this context, we use a sort of a slightly different flavor external client apps, a local one rather than a packaged one. Yeah, as I mentioned, these are external client apps are what Salesforce are promoting as sort of the way to do it going forwards. And there are a few other because you're sort of as the owner of the settings of the connected app as well as the policies. There's a few more things to know about and to make sure are done securely if you've got apps set up like this in your org. So yeah, sort of run through the kind of the main best practices which apply both to connected apps and to external client apps. So generally speaking, it's a good idea to just have one one external client app, or well, yeah, nowadays one external client app for per integration. So kind of makes it like really sort of really clean that you've just got this single integration that connects through this app. The scopes that you associate to the app. This is the scopes list basically correlates to the list of things that have to be approved as the app is authorized in the org. And on the whole, you want to keep this to just the bare minimum that are needed for that app to function. And very specifically, there's a few scopes that give additional access that are not normally needed for kind of the sorts of integrations that I mentioned there, these sort of system to system integrations. So refresh token is one of them. Normally with these sort of back-end integrations, there isn't a user authentication happening at all. So it's it's not normally relevant to have a refresh token. The authentication is normally done in a different way. The full scope is normally best to be avoided, because what that basically means is you're just adding every single other scope to the integration. So it's sort of a shortcut, but it's not normally necessary to give that level of control to the app. And web allows the access tokens that have been issued by the app to be used to log in online as well, which is not normally required. And yeah, the settings part of what that allows is configuring the authentication flows that are provided, that are allowed for the app. So yeah, sort of setting that up to only allow the ones that are genuinely used for the app. I think we've sort of spoken about the admin approved pre-authorized, so that sort of equally applies here. That's sort of generally the way to go. It's normally a good idea as well to have a distinct profile for each integration. And the main reason for doing that is that you can control at the profile level which IP addresses can be are allowed as sort of connected for connections through that profile. So if you have a system that lives on a particular IP address or only connects through certain IP addresses, having one profile per integration allows you to control that at a integration specific level. There's so the API only integration license is generally a good idea to use that if you can. That's a free you're allowed 5 users under that for free, so that's kind of quite handy, and it's often quite suitable for these sorts of integrations. And then in terms of the permissions, again, you want to really keep this kind of minimal to what the integration user really needs to be able to access in the org. Okay, so sort of touched on bits of this earlier, but just to sort of summarize some of the sort of important differences from external client apps to from connected apps. And so, as I say, one of the big things is they're just somewhere else in setup, which just is a bit of a pain. But yeah, they are conceptually very similar. They're not copied to sandboxes, so this is quite a different behavior to connected apps. So if you're sort of used to creating sandboxes and then configuring test versions of integrations that connect to sandboxes, it's not possible in the same sort of way with external client apps. You need to basically go and typically manually recreate the external client app in the sandbox if you do need to test an integration. So yeah, that's something worth bearing in mind. And particularly before you sort of switch over to external client apps, make sure you have thought through what that means for testing. There are a couple of sort of less secure flows that are blocked. So the username password flow that's sort of now considered not very secure is not allowed in external client apps. And that sort of historically there has been quite a feature gap with connected apps. I think there's still one or two sort of unusual things missing, but yeah, for the most part, there's almost feature parity. And so final thing I wanted to mention about external client apps is it's just there is you might have noticed there's now a button to convert a connected app to an external client app. Sort of does everything for you. It just kind of takes the settings of the connected app and makes an external client app. It has a special type of migrated. So yeah, it makes it quite easy to change your connected apps to external client apps, and it is it is a good idea to plan for that, because it's the roadmap is really going to be focused on external client apps going forwards. But I think for some of the reasons mentioned, you do just want to make sure that you've thought through what those differences mean in the context of your integrations before doing that.
Just two questions on that, Lawrence, I think are quite important. I think one person just said, what happens to the OAuths if they convert?
It should be retained, so it keeps the same client ID and secrets that the connected app had before, which basically means it's the same connection parameters for the external system. So yeah, it should be a case if you convert it, and it continues to work. I mean, what I would say is test this before you go and do it. But yeah, my understanding is it retains the same connection.
And then there's a question about converting from connected apps to external client apps and what's the deadline and what's the risk. Just to clarify, I assume the converting from EAC to the external client app, sorry, that is for anything that you're managing, an integration that you're managing, as opposed to if it's an app exchange solution and so on, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm actually not aware of there being a deadline.
I haven't
That
seen
might
one.
be okay. Right. So yeah, yeah, as I say, I'm not aware of that, so I can't really speak to it. Everything I've seen and heard is that connected apps are sort of, they're still considered secure. Um, it's but they're just not the direction of travel for Salesforce, and they sort of, yeah, external client apps are considered more secure. So I don't think I don't think you should feel like you need to rush into this because your org's going to fall over if you don't do it or anything like that. At this point in time, it seems like Salesforce are not, they're not kind of end of life. Yeah, there's no sort of end of life notice on connected apps. But yeah, that could change at some point, obviously. Okay, so so I'm going to move on. There's sort of a couple of sort of smaller topics I wanted to run through, and then hopefully get a few minutes just on some of the emails as well. So the first one is around the SOAP login method. So SOAP login, we kind of won't go into sort of anything technical here, but SOAP login method is just it's an older way of authenticating to Salesforce orgs that doesn't require a connected app. So yeah, the SOAP connection is just it sort of happens without a connected app, just with a username and password and a security token. This has been supported by Salesforce for quite a long time, but they've announced that this is going to be prevented from the summer 20. Sorry, that should say summer 27. So yeah, don't. Yeah, I'm glad I noticed that. Don't worry too much about this summer 27. But summer 27 will be here sooner than we yeah, sooner than we imagine, I'm sure. So yeah, this is one to plan around, because if you do have kind of legacy integrations that are connecting this way, it could be quite, depending on the system, it might be quite an involved thing to have those reconfigured to use a more modern method. So fortunately, it's pretty easy to see if you've got any SOAP login usage going on. So you can look in login history, sort of, yeah, like either run a report or extract the last 6 months, and there's an API type that shows either SOAP partner or SOAP enterprise. So if you see that, it's a sign that it's SOAP login being used. And yeah, as I say, it should hopefully be clear if you do see that, sort of what integration that's associated with, and yeah, worth reaching out to whoever's providing that integration and working with them to get that moved over to OAuth. Okay. Next up, I just wanted to talk briefly about browser extensions and how sort of connections happen through those. So browser extensions kind of work in quite a different way to everything else in terms of how they access your Salesforce org. So, or I should say some browser extensions. So some of them do use some of the methods that we looked at already, sort of more kind of standard OAuth methods. But a lot of them, kind of through ease of use, they reuse your login session basically that's been provided to your browser and access Salesforce kind of on your behalf. They're like accessing the Salesforce APIs as if they were you. So they're using the what's called the session ID from your from a cookie that's been set by Salesforce. So this is really convenient because it means that you don't need to log in when you use a browser extension like Inspector Reloaded. You can just sort of run queries and so on without having to authenticate. But it's worth just sort of bearing in mind that Salesforce Inspector Reloaded is very widely used and sort of generally reasonably trusted. But what you've got to kind of have in mind is like every extension that you have on your browser has this ability as well. So the takeaway here really is like just be really, really careful what extensions you and your users add to your browser, because they're like an extension in your browser is effectively it can impersonate you and do whatever you can do in Salesforce. So yeah, make sure you're only really using extensions from trusted vendors. There are sort of ways in Office 365 and in Google to restrict and sort of whitelist to certain extensions. And then there's also a Salesforce feature API access control that will sort of help prevent this as well. Okay. And then I'll do one slide on API access control and then sort of see if we've got any questions just after that. So yeah, sort of very, very high level. I kind of talked about, I think, all of the things that are relevant to this setting, but it's quite a broad setting. So API access control was put in, I think, a few years ago. It predates a lot of the changes that have been happening recently. But it's intended to provide a sort of an additional layer of security over integrations than it sort of happens out the box. And at the point that it was released, it sort of did these 5 things. The first one probably looks quite familiar because it's also effectively, this prevents users authorizing uninstalled connected apps. I mean, that's basically what's been added recently towards the end of last year, that sort of forces you to install connected apps before your users can use them. So historically, like that, this was one of the really big reasons that organizations would use API access control, is to get that level of protection, which obviously now isn't relevant. But it does other things as well that you need to think about if you are considering turning this on. So it will block the session IDs that are available to browser extensions and being used to access Salesforce. So it will effectively block things like Salesforce Inspector Reloaded working in its kind of default way. That extension specifically they do have a workaround to allow you to use that through OAuth. But yeah, sort of in general, it reduces what's possible with Salesforce extensions. It prevents SOAP login being used. This will be obviously removed from all orgs anyway next year, but that will kind of block it from today. It can affect some Visualforce pages that expose session IDs and sort of use those. So if you have Visualforce pages doing kind of creative things with session IDs that can be impacted by the session. And there are some examples of sort of legacy integrations that that use session IDs in similar sorts of ways as well that can be impacted. So yeah, I wanted to touch on it because it kind of is in the area of everything that we're talking about. But it's, yeah, as I say, it's quite a kind of broad thing. And I think, yeah, sort of takeaway really is if you are thinking about this, you need to test really, really carefully around all of these areas because it does, yeah, it does affect quite a lot. Okay, I'm quite conscious of time. I think we've got time for a few questions, Emma, or
Absolutely. So I'm going to say we've probably got till about 25 to. So I'm rather than there has been a few bits on the chat that we've maybe passed over, but they may have been answered. So I'm going to suggest that people kind of come off mute and ask their questions if that's okay. So anybody who asked a question that's not been answered or has a new question, please go ahead. Don't all ask at once.
I've got a question. It's about generic certificates. I have so I thought we were going to touch on these, and I don't know if it's different to what we're talking about. I have expired certificates showing in my health check and in the critical section, and I don't know what they are, and I don't know if I need to do anything about it. I don't know if this means something has stopped working, but maybe we don't use it anymore and it doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I was going to make
remember being in
I was going to
position
make a suggestion about this. Lawrence, can you share your Salesforce? Have you got a certificate we can look at? Only
I
because, so
think
Michelle, I
I
had this
do,
question.
yes.
I had this exact question. There were a lot of expired certificates in a number of orgs. And if Lawrence opens maybe that very top certificate.
Yeah, that's what mine look
Right,
like.
that's
They
fine.
sort of
And
named
then
that.
if you then hover over the delete, you see that delete that we can't click on, it will tell you where it's being used. So
Oh,
in
that is
here it says
nice. I
we
didn't know
can't
that.
delete this certificate because your identity provider is using it. So if we now get Lawrence to go and look in search for identity provider, if we then look on here, we can have a look at
There it
that and it
is.
will tell you. Now for Lawrence, you can see that he's got service providers who are using it. But what I found was that we've got expired certificates that when you look at this bottom section about what's being used, there's nothing in it. So actually, you've got a certificate that has no identity providers. So basically, you can delete it. So Lawrence doesn't have the choice here to delete it because he's got like edit disabled and so on because he's got identity providers. But if you haven't, you can then delete the identity provider piece in there, and that will then allow you to delete the certificate. And I
Okay,
think
cool.
this is a historical thing. I could be wrong, and I would love someone to tell me I'm wrong, but I think it's a historical thing where these used to be auto-created. Their assumption was you would use them for something, but because you never use them for anything, you just then every year get the please set up a new one, please set up a new one. But actually, you're not using it for anything. So you just need to get rid of them.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that. I didn't know about that hover thing.
Oh, do you know what? I
That's really
felt really
handy.
silly because
But
when I asked the question, somebody was like, just delete it. And I was like, what? Because no one wants to delete stuff, right? So yeah, there you go. That's what I discovered. And I can tell you that I did this in a number of orgs, probably September, October time last year, and we've not had any problems.
Oh, I have a small question, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
yeah,
Um, the Yeah, really, really useful talk and just really basic. Actually, a lot of apps, they're not being used very often, maybe once a year or so. So actually, it would make sense to kind of freeze the access in the meantime. And initially, I thought, well, there's that really handy block button that I could block and unblock it. But then when you spoke more about that, Lawrence, I began to kind of question that logic. So what advice would you have, even for an org that's not using, doesn't have an involved admin? So maybe they use Workbench or like some of the really the tools very infrequently.
Hmm.
What advice?
I mean, one option might just be to take away the access that users have to that app. So the um, admin approved access. If you take off the permission set, that would effectively prevent it from being possible to connect for the users that were previously able to connect through that app. So that, yeah, that kind of has the effect of removing the access without sort of sending the message that this is a dangerous app and we definitely don't want to use it. If that was your concern around blocking it, I mean, blocking it, I don't think it's a terrible idea to block it. It's just it might get confused with why it was blocked, and it also might just be, if you, yeah, I'm not sure if you block and unblock whether you get all the same policies back or if you have to set them up again. But that's yeah, something to think
Thank
about
you
as
very
well.
much. So I'll instruct the admin to assign themselves a permission set and then unassign it when they no longer need it.
That
Thank
feels,
you.
yeah, sort of the best representation of reality, I guess, to me. But
Awesome.
thanks. Um, Yvonne, so you've got your hand up.
Hi. I had a question that I chucked in the chat, and it was to do with when you were talking about the tokens, how you shouldn't have tokens that live forever. And my question is around passwords. So I've got more than one org, and it's generally web connections where they're set up with the connection is via a username and a password, and it's on an integration user. Sometimes it's not, often it's on an integration user. And then when I look at it really closely, I can then see that the permission set attached to that integration user is never change password. So never expire the password, because if you expire the password, then the web connection stops working. That doesn't feel great, but I don't know what the alternative is. What's the
Yeah.
alternative?
Well, the
And web
um,
teams can always they just tell me, they're like, oh, but that's just how it is. And I'm like, is it though?
yeah, yeah. Well, the I guess one thing to consider is that I mean, generally the guidance now isn't to change passwords very frequently. I think it's like, some years ago, I think the general security guidance was it's good to force people to change passwords a lot of the time. I think nowadays the thinking is it's better to sort of have longer, more complex passwords that are not changed frequently. So password not being changed isn't necessarily in itself like a really bad thing, so long as it's protected as a very careful secret. I mean, it's probably still a good idea to intentionally change it, like every couple of years or something. But sort of if it is, I mean, there's sort of another strain to this, which is around sort of should the password be involved in the integration. But that's probably a separate question. But actually assuming that it is required for the integration, you probably don't want that to automatically expire without you having planned for it. So it's probably better to plan to change it intentionally. Um, the just to go back to that sort of that other angle. I mean, like the the general, when I mentioned about like the username password flow isn't supported with external client apps, and the SOAP login, which requires username password, is being phased out. Like there's a real push to not be doing kind of password, like not use the password as part of the integration authentication. So if your website is connecting with a method that is sort of one of the better practices, so something like client credentials or JWT bearer flow. I mean, I'm getting into technical stuff that I promised myself this morning I wouldn't. But if you're using sort of one of the more kind of standard flows, then actually changing that password shouldn't interrupt the integration anyway. So I'm not sure I've helped with your question really, but it wouldn't. I guess maybe the short answer is it wouldn't worry me, especially having that having that sort of net password never expires configured. I think the important thing is that the password is secure, and that that you're kind of proactive around rotating it at some point. But yeah,
Oh,
you probably don't want
okay.
it to expire all by itself.
No, that has happened and it wasn't fun.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, well, a big thank you to Lawrence. I think Lawrence has filled our heads fully with lots of security stuff to go away and think about. So thank you so much, and thank you for everybody for all their questions. I'm now going to stop the recording.